case you were wondering. We're gonna get started in just a couple minutes. I just need to share that I am live on social media, and we'll jump right in. Alright, so I'm ready to go. For those of you who are new, I'm Roland Taylor, aka Roland It. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, obviously, which is where we are right now. And probably from the next time I stream, you'll be able to watch me on multiple platforms as well, because I am going to be using Restream.io, so you'll be able to see me pretty much anywhere. Just give me a second here because I'm hearing my music a little too low. Sorry about that. Yeah. Alright, so today, as I said, we're going to be covering glass in Inkscape and CSS. So let me just pull up my it's a virtual server for Apple. I don't really know what to call it. So yeah, but in any case, just pulling this up so I can open a new project, and we'll be using that for the CSS part of this tree, basically. So yeah. Today we're going to be, as I said, breaking glass, and when I say breaking, I mean like breaking it down into its principal components, because whether you're using CSS or you're using say like graphic design tools or whatever it may be, it's all the same, basically, same principles. Designing glass is pretty straightforward, but you still have to keep some things in mind, but they're shared across all media that you may use. Alright, let me just create a new folder here called Breaking Glass. And then we're going to reload this and jump right into that folder. And I'm going to create a new file called index.html. Another file under CSS called Breaking Glass. And when I get to the CSS part of this tutorial, I'll actually be working directly in these files, so you'll be able to follow along from there. Alright, so I'm gonna hop over to Inkscape shortly. And you'll notice, by the way, I'm using, finally, an HD screen, so I can actually see a whole lot more. It was really difficult working on the previous monitor that I had, but that one broke down, and I'm actually thankful that it did, because it was driving me nuts. And I didn't realize just how much it was driving me nuts, so I'm grateful for things going wrong so that they can go right. Basically, I'm finally working with the HD monitor a lot better than before. I have a lot more real estate, and you get to see more of what I'm doing. Alright, so for today's tutorial, oh, and I forgot to mention, the music is from Creators Live. For those who are not in the chat, you can find them on YouTube. They produce free Afro beats for content creators, and I'm really loving their music, so you can go and check them out. If you are in the chat, you can click the link directly from there, and you should be able to find their channel and the playlist that I'm using today. So you can, if you're using Inkscape, you can create some layers, because we're going to be working with layers today. I'm going to use the bottom layer just to be a background. Typically I use a photograph, so I'm actually going to add a photograph to this at some point, but for now we're just going to work with the basics. And I'm going to set this, I have my page set to 1024 by 768 by default, and since this is scalable, you can scale that to, like, say 1600 by 1200, or 2560 I think is by 1920, but if you want a different aspect ratio, that's cool too. All those are neither here nor there, just mentioning that for those who may be wondering. But yeah, so with this in place, let me jump right in. Now when it comes to glass, the thing that you're trying to create is two things: transparency and shadows for the most part. But there's a third aspect that you may also want to include, and if you would have seen my dev tutorial, if you follow me on Twitter, you probably came across that at some point, and if not, I'll drop it in the chat shortly. But I have a dev tutorial where I did some glass techniques in CSS, and I actually covered sheen as well, so you can check that out when I post it. But yeah, the idea is that you want to basically have transparency, as I said, and shadows. Those are the main two principles that you want, whether you're using CSS or you're doing graphic design. So to demonstrate that, I'll just create a simple square first, and then turn it down. Well, turn on the alpha in this case, not the opacity. Turn on the alpha on it so that it's somewhat transparent, and then I'm going to add stroke to it. But before I do that, let me duplicate it, because it's best if we use two objects to this instead of blurring the original object. I duplicated it, turn off the fill, turn on the stroke, turn the size of the well, the width of the stroke down so it's kind of small, and then turn up the blur. And then I'm going to put this at the back of that other one, duplicate it again, and turn the blur right down to nothing, and turn this stroke down some more. Not completely off, you still want it visible. Right. So now you have an outline, you have a shadow. I forgot also to mention the outline, but that's not always necessary. It's more obvious in CSS especially, and I'll show you that later, but it's more obvious when you're using CSS that you have an outline even when there's no actual physical outline. Alright, so these are the basic principles for creating glass: transparency and shadows. But there's another aspect to it, as I said, which is sheen, and it can also be described as like fall off, which is how the light falls on a particular object. Say if the light was coming from a particular direction. So I'm going to use an old technique that I used to use in my early streams, By the way, if you're seeing these red lines, this is a development build of Inkscape, so you may not have it in your, if you're using a release version, like say 1.1, you may not have these alignment handles or whatever they're called. But yeah, so I'm going to put this over here, and I'm going to, this is not actually doing anything, this is just for demonstration purposes. I'm going to add a sun, if you want to call it that, to our canvas, and this is going to be kind of like a light source. Alright, let me move all this stuff, by the way, to another layer so it's easier to work with. As I would have mentioned, we're using layers today, made life easier. Let me move this one to layer 3. And we're going to call layer 3 light source. This one glass, and this one backdrop. Alright, so our light source, I'm going to give it a color. Doesn't really matter what color it is, but if you want, you can... Oops, this is stroke, not fill. Alright, if you want, you can actually make that matter, and I'll explain what I mean by that shortly. Let me change the color of this background too, because it's kind of clashing with my light source. Alright, that's much better. Alright, so this is our light source. Now we need a direction for where the light is falling. So let's pretend that the light is coming in a diagonal direction from up here down to here. So I'm gonna, oops, what did I just do? Sorry about that. I just pressed the start button by accident. Alright, so we're gonna draw a rectangle here, make it yellow, and rotate it. And then we're going to use object to path, merge these two here, and now this is our light source. So now we know where the light is falling. And this is obviously not necessary for actually designing, but it's a good rule of thumb to use, and it helps you to visualize what you're actually trying to achieve. So in this case, since the light is falling from this angle over here, and it's going to hit the glass somewhere around here, more likely the fall off is going to be stronger around this, well, around this area. It's going to fall off more, and you're going to have less fall off behind here, which means that behind here will be more opaque. So what we're going to do, lock this layer, unlock the glass layer, and select the solid area that doesn't have any stroke on it. And then we're going to add a linear gradient, double click on it to edit, and drag like this so that the light falls off in this direction. And you can see that I'm matching the alignment of the gradient to the light source. Right? Then the next thing I'm going to do now is add another point to this gradient. And by the way, if you're using an older version of Inkscape, the gradient editor will be a little different than what you see here. So I would suggest using one of the latest releases if you want to follow this directly. Alright, so I just added that. Let me add another one because you're going to need about two. This one here, I'm going to make this completely transparent. And this one I'm going to drag back this way. Then I'm going to drag this one back this way again. And so now you can see. Alright, before I stop there, let me turn this down a bit. Like 48 or so should be good. And I'm going to turn this down some more as well. So like 36. Good. So now this looks like if we have the light falling on our glass from a particular direction. And that gives the idea of fall off. But it still doesn't quite look all that realistic, obviously. So what we want to do now, I mean, this is fine if you were trying to achieve a more cartoonish design, or if you're doing like comics or anything like that. But if you want something more realistic, or photorealistic I should say, what you can do is duplicate this, So Control D on your keyboard. Make sure that the width and height are locked, and then holding Shift, resize from the corner like this. About there should be good, and then you can blur it. And the reason for this is it gives you a more realistic effect. But if you want to go even further in realism, turn off your gradient, just make it a solid color. You can turn it up or down depending on what you need to do, and then adjust the blur even more. Now this still matches our light source because we still have fall off around here, so the light is not really hitting this area as much, but then you have the kind of like light is falling here and reflecting back from this area more. But you can increase that even more by going for some sheen, as I mentioned from the beginning. So what we're going to do is actually add another rectangle. Go to Object to Path, and then select one side, insert a node, and select the other side and insert a node. Now the reason I didn't do all, I don't want nodes in between these sections here. I just want this middle piece here. So select these two in the middle, then put them to auto smooth, and then you can use your keyboard arrow key to move them across like this. You can also move the top ones a bit like that. And then I'm going to rotate this object. And the reason I'm doing this, typically light will fall in a smoother manner than what you would have here with a regular gradient. So I'm creating kind of a curve to this sheen that I'm creating. Now there are two ways you can do this. You can have it be flat, so that you can have a small highlight, something like this. And you can make that solid if you're going for a more cartoonish look. Or you can have something blurred and sort of like semi-transparent. You can even use a gradient. You can play with this as much as you want, basically. And then we're just going to blur this until we get the sufficient effect that we want. And now it looks a little more realistic than it did before. Alright. So that's one way you can achieve this. Now, what I'm going to do is group all this together and move it up. And then I'm going to add another glass layer and do some other techniques that we can have with this. So let's say we had glass that is not really all that reflective, right? It's more or less transparent. I'm going to create another piece of glass here. Turn this almost all the way down, so like 18 or so is good. Duplicate that. Turn off stroke, turn off fill. Now the outline, as I said, is not necessary, but it's useful for realism. But if you are just going for the glass itself, as I told you, in CSS it's a lot more straightforward to do and more obvious. And I'm not aiming for complete photorealism today, so don't necessarily look for that. Alright, this mouse is being special. I'm trying to pan and the mouse does not want to pan. I decided to use one of my other mice today, mouses I should say, today, but the scroll wheel on this one doesn't like to click. Anyway, alright, so we're going to duplicate this again and then turn the stroke down a bit and blur it. If it's not visible, you may need to adjust it until you get the right effect. Alright, I may have blurred it a bit too much. Alright, good. Again, as I mentioned, for those who are now joining this video or this stream, depending on when you're watching, one of the principles is that we add shadows to give the effect of glass. But you don't need shadows, it's just a good principle to follow when you're creating glass. Alright, so that's why I'm adding this shadow to this here. And then I'm going to put this at the back so it's not overlaying the glass itself. Alright, let me turn this down some more because I think it can be more transparent than it is. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to add an image to this at some point so that you can see just how cool it looks when it's on a more complicated background. That's a good way to put it, I guess. Alright, so let's say you had some glass that is not as reflective, but there's still a sheen on it. You could leave it like almost completely transparent like this is, and then you can put where you think the light is going to fall. As I told you, the light is coming from this direction down to here, so it's less likely to hit up here. You can put something down here, like say a circle, and you can then make this you can make this white and pretty much completely opaque and blur it. Drag this wherever you need to put it, and what I'm going to do now is actually duplicate this and move it up somewhat, then resize, turn down the alpha. This is only one method you can use, but you can use multiple methods depending on what you're trying to achieve. Let me move this a little closer and resize a bit. Alright, so now this looks as though the light is falling from this angle and kind of like bouncing off on particular areas there. But we can improve this look even more by turning down the alpha a bit as well. Blur these even more together. Alright, there we go. So that's a little bit more realistic now, like what I was talking about. Now you can improve this even more by adding a line. So I'm going to draw a rectangle like this, and then rotate. And this now is across the... Oops. This is snapping, so let me turn off snapping so it doesn't get in my way. Right, this is across the diagonal center of the glass itself. Let me adjust the height on this as well so it's thinner. I don't want it as thick as it is. Right, there we go. And then I'm going to blur this as well, but not as much as I did before with the other ones. Add a radial gradient to it as well. Now all these are based on real life observations from real life glass that I've made, you know, just looking at how light works in real life. And I always advise you when you're doing design, go outside, walk around, look at stuff, look at buildings, look at trees, look at cars, whatever you can find, and that's how you can begin to develop some of your design skills. You don't always need to go and take a class. Sometimes you need to go and take a walk. I'm not saying that you shouldn't take classes. I mean, here I am teaching design, but my point is one of the best ways you can improve your design skills is to go outside and take a walk, or just be a little more observant, slow down a bit. I think it's a good principle for life in general to slow down a bit, but it's a very good principle for design. Slow down and take in things a little more, take in the details a little more, instead of just, you know, going and reading tutorials. And hey, again, as I said, nothing against them. I write tutorials, I record tutorials, and here I am doing a stream. But the point is, obviously, take in some more detail, because that's where the real improvement will come from, even in the stuff you're reading. Alright, so All that said and all that done, let me turn off the light source, and now I'm gonna drop in the image that I told you about. I haven't forgotten, by the way, that I mentioned I'm going to share my dev tutorial in the chat. I will do that shortly. Alright, so let me import my go-to image recently. A photograph I took that was deliberately blurred because it works well with glass. This one right here. It's kind of big, so it might take my computer a little while to show it. Alright, there it is. I need to resize it. And drop it in place. Alright, so now you can see just how realistic this glass was. You probably were thinking when I had it on that solid background, that doesn't look all that good. Well, trust me, it does. I know what I'm doing. Been doing this for a while. So you can see how the differences appear, like I would have mentioned. The sheen on this one is a little more subtle and much more obvious on this one, obviously. And depending on where the background image is, maybe more or less obvious. Right. So again, that's another thing I should mention. Another principle to keep in mind is that the background behind whatever glass you're trying to simulate is also very important. So like glass look is not as good, say like if you're doing a website. It doesn't look as good if you have a solid background most of the time, because glass look on a solid background doesn't really bring out the contrast very well. If you're going to use glass, I would suggest using photographs or even like gradients and patterns and stuff like that. And when I say patterns, you have to be careful with that too. Like, don't use a checkerboard background and put glass on it, because that's just kind of ugly. But you know, like using photographs and stuff usually works pretty well. Actually, I can demonstrate that to you with my own work. Not this blueberry template. This is a work in progress and it does not have any glass. So not this one. But right, from here I have some templates that actually do use glass. Some of them are not completed yet, so you can't purchase them or anything, but like steel, for instance, uses the glass look. Let me load that up for you. Steel is still work in progress, but oops, but you'll be able to purchase that as soon as it is completed. So if we go to features, here you see a glass look. This is more or less solid glass, so it's not as shiny or anything like that, but I still use the glass look principles here on this one. Layouts as well also has the same thing, but I haven't changed the background image on this yet, so it's not as obvious. But if you were to use this in the real world with real photographs of your choosing, obviously you'll be able to see what I'm talking about here. Not all the features of this are complete either, so won't be able to see everything. Alright, let me go back and show you another one. Alright, let me just type it in. Going back too many times. I'm not actually getting to where I want. Alright, so Navigator is probably a better one to show you for this effect. I have one glass element in here, but I still use the glass look for pretty much everything. So it's kind of opaque when you click on any particular section. And again, this theme is not completed either, but still shows you some of the functionality that it has. And as I told you, using a photograph gives you that natural contrast and a degree of organized chaos, which is another principle you'll hear me talk about a lot whenever I'm teaching design. Organized chaos and stacking simplicity. Those are the two main principles that I work with, and I derive those from nature. This is not something that I went somewhere and you know, like quote unquote learn from someone. I coined those terms based on my real life observations of real life things. So like flowers, trees, as I said, buildings, etc. If you look at real life, you'll see that organized chaos and stacking simplicity are the way that most designs are built, even in nature. So like animals, plants, etc. are built on that principle. Alright, the one last one I'll show you before I get back to the actual design stuff is Photogenic. This one you actually can purchase from my Teespring store. Everything on Photogenic is glassy, even the background image is glass. And the footer as well with my copyright information is glass. So, if you want to see how glass look can really look really cool, this is the theme to go with. I have it in this layout here. That's the first layout. Then the second one just flips things around. Let me open a section and show you. As it says, I am Photogenic. Photogenic is an uncomplicated template by Roland Ditsart. It is designed to function as a single page website in which all content is loaded dynamically via basic vanilla JavaScript. Yes, that was a lovely description of this page. And as you can see, this glass look works with pretty much any photo you throw at it. Well, not literally, but it works with many different photos. But I will caution you, as I learned when I was designing this, the background that you choose does matter. So you'll notice that I used photographs with high contrast in them. So like even this one, this is taken outside of my house one evening, and I deliberately blurred the background, so you're getting a little bit of photography tips here at the same time. If you use an app like say Hedgecam 2 on Android, I don't know what would be available say on iPhones or on other platforms out there, but if you use an app similar to Hedgecam 2, that gives you the option to choose your not just zoom levels, what's the word I'm looking for? Your focus, right? Can I get that word called? If you can choose manual focus on your photo app, you can try doing this. I sometimes turn the focus up or down till the point where things get blurry, and you get some really cool background photographs like this. So we choose another one like this one here. This is actually a real inset that I found in our bathroom, and I took a photo of it, but you can see it blurred the background again. And the reason I did that is because glass look works best if you have high contrast, but also if you have some like gradients to the background. So a blurred background of or a blurred photograph gives you that naturally. So you actually have some gradients here in the roof of this image here. That's actually a roof in our bathroom. But yeah, you actually have the natural gradient for the wood. You have the natural fall off of the light here, and all that without having to go and design anything in an editor anywhere. So those are some free tips for you. Wasn't even planned, but yeah, there you go. Alright, so with that said, I'm going to hop over to Atom, which is my preferred editor. If you're in Visual Studio Code, should be pretty easy to follow because it is from the same developer. So should be pretty easy to follow this. I mean, it's all the same code anyway, so it doesn't really make that much of a difference what you're using. Your text editor of choice, let's put it that way. Alright, so let's hop into breaking glass in CSS. You'll get to see how I build my websites when I'm doing that glass that I did just now. So, first things first. I was supposed to say first things first is that my headset keeps slipping. That is not anything to do with what we're doing, but my headset keeps slipping. So, yeah, my apologies for that. Alright, first things first, we will add an HTML template. I have a plugin installed for that. Does the work for me. I'll just take out this Bootstrap link and jQuery. I no longer use those. Those used to be my bread and butter one time, but no longer a Bootstrap fan and no longer a jQuery fan. Nothing against them, just I moved on. So let's drop a title in this. Breaking glass. And we're gonna link up the CSS. then in the body, we're going to add a few elements. So nav, nav, and I'm going to add a header for the title. I'm going to add main and a footer. Inside of main, I'm going to add 2 sections. Inside this section, I'm going to add 3 articles. I like to work in 3s, that's just my thing. This section down here will have 2 articles. So it's going to be a total of 5 articles in this page. Now, by the way, let me do a quick mock-up in Inkscape so I can visualize, for those who are not in my head, obviously, what I'm trying to achieve here. So, alright, let me lock this and turn off these and add a new layer. And this will be mock-up. Let me just check something quickly, by the way, because my system is running a little sluggish. I may be running too much at once, so just a second. Be right back. Alright, and back is Firefox. That's being special today. That's the problem. Shouldn't cause any problems, but Firefox occasionally uses a little too much CPU. Anyway, so here's what we're going to have. We're going to have the nav up here like this. And next to it is going to be a title, which is what the header will produce, or provide, I should say. So this will be our title. Then we're going to have 3 articles within a section. Alright, let me just group these and resize them. Right, so we're going to have these 3 within a section somewhere like around here. And then we're going to have the other section down here with 2 columns. And we're going to use dark glass for those 2 columns. I'm not so much worried about what the content will be, because we're not building a real website for a real client. So this is just basically a matter of layout more so than a matter of you know, being bothered about content and stuff like that. Alright, so this is basically what it's going to look like in a rough sense when we're done. And I'm going to use a different photograph than the one I'm using in the background here. So that was just to visualize for those of you who are not in my head, which is pretty much anybody watching. But let me save this so I can free up some RAM and CPU. And then I'm going to close Inkscape so it can behave itself. I mean, Firefox can behave itself, that is. Alrighty, so we have everything in place. Now let's just drop in some basic content. Title. We're gonna add a couple of links here about, oops, link. all this is miscellaneous, but still we're adding it just for the sake of, you know, making this look a little more realistic. Not sure why this didn't auto reload. It's supposed to. So maybe I need to, I don't know if I need to restart this live server thing. There you are. Alright, I'm gonna open this again and hopefully it will live reload as it is supposed to. Now you'll notice nothing is actually in place yet because our CSS hasn't been touched as yet. Alright, so I'm gonna add some classes now to these articles. Call this B class article 0 and just copy this to the others, and this will be article 1. Now for those wondering why I'm using classes and not just going with the semantic elements, it's usually recommended that you use classes in CSS for practically everything. I mean, you can just go with the semantic elements, but you'll find that if you want to use them somewhere else that you get some specificity issues, so you can overcome that by just using classes in the first place. Unless, of course, you're designing for a client or something and you know for sure that you're not going to be using any other elements of that type, then you can go right ahead. But if you're going to be, say, like using a framework or whatever, you usually want to avoid clashes, so don't do that. That's the advice I'll give you. And that's a little shout out to older versions of Bootstrap that used to drive me nuts because they decided, for whatever reason, to have paragraphs and spans and all sorts of stuff styled by default, and I used to butt my head every time I had to develop something, only to realize that it wasn't my fault. It was just that by default some elements were being styled when they shouldn't be. So my advice, use classes for everything where you can, unless of course you know for sure you can get away with it. Alright, we're almost done with this miscellaneous stuff here. The body, you could style this directly in your CSS, but I'm going to add a class to this as well. And we're just going to call this B class. So let's start with that. And we're going to... Wait, does this have the CSS extension on it? Because it's not styling it correctly. I see what happened. I didn't remember to add .css. So let me rename this and we'll get our highlighting and everything shortly. Alright, there we go. So first thing we want to do on the body is set margin and padding to 0. Now that that's covered, let me add the background image as well. And I'm putting everything in alphabetical order as I usually do based on what my linter told me to do. The linter, of course, gives you less errors and less problems, all that stuff, so yeah. Don't put a space before what full stop, by the way. I don't have any space before the full stop. You're lying. Alright, so background, no, not background color, background image. URL. IMG bglass backdrop.png. We don't have that yet, but we will shortly. And background, attachment, fixed, background, size. Cover. I believe that's all we need here. I think. Alright, I will add that backdrop image in a little bit. So the next thing we want is BG title, bglass title, sorry. And for that we will put a size of, well, a height of 50 pixels. We will put it to position fixed. Top will be 0, left 0, width 15%. Then for BG glass, or bglass, sorry, nav, same height. Oh, I should remember this because I was recording a tutorial last night and I used the same method. We're going to use CSS custom properties, which I recommend doing for pretty much any project. We're going to use custom properties for this. So we're going to put var nav height, or better yet, bglass nav height. Good to have a prefix for everything. And let's drop that under root so that it's available to anything in our HTML document. So now we can share this between different classes. An even better way to do this is to actually group all of our classes that share certain stuff together. So I'm actually going to do that right away. I'm teaching you extras that I did not plan to teach you by default. So bglass nav and yeah, bglass title. And we'll move this up to here so I don't have to duplicate it in all of these. Alright, so now they both use that and both use position fixed. In fact, both use all these here so they can stay right there. So now the only differences will be the width. For this is 85%. Both will use display flex. Flex flow will be raw, no wrap. Padding on this one is 0 at the top and bottom and 15 pixels on the sides. And for this one, padding is 0 at the top and bottom and 25 pixels on the sides. And then we are going to, am I forgetting anything? Oh yes, justify and align content. I know CSS is a lot of work, but it pays off in the end, so stick around. Alright, they're almost arranged as they should be. I'm going to I'm gonna be moving some stuff around as I go to, because whenever I find stuff that's shared, I'm going to put them all under the same um like what you call it, declaration block. Couldn't get that word called. And just a side note here, I am writing a CSS book, so techniques like this will be in there, just so you know. It's not giving you the title yet, but it's going to be covering some ways that you can write CSS more logically, and also some fixes for common and even uncommon problems in CSS. So look out for that sometime in whenever future. I can't predict yet when it will be completed, but I'm working on it. Alright, taking a pause here because the music obviously stopped, so I have to load up a new playlist. I'll drop that in the chat too when I finish. Quick correction, I don't actually have to drop any playlist in the chat, because apparently it's the same playlist, but for some reason Firefox decided to pause the video, which gives me the creeps, because I'm wondering how did my computer get sentient. Just joking, but yeah, I'm dropping the tutorial that I mentioned in the chat at this point too, so you should be able to find that. Right, there it is. That is my glass tutorial for CSS. You can go check that out when you're ready. Alright, so let's get back to it. I'm gonna style the list of links in the nav, which actually will turn into a menu on smaller screens. Let me just make sure I have I didn't add a class to this. Let me fix that. The glass menu. Alright, so let me see what is shared between these and what is not. Going to be kind of a process of elimination here. Alright, so it will use flex slow roll, no wrap, display flex, align items center, and justify content center. Missing anything? I don't think so. Oh, it just didn't reload. So it's back to doing that again. I'm not fighting with that today. I don't know what happened there. Oh, now I realize what it is that I need to fix on it. Position is relative. Instead of overriding that, let me take this out, because I don't need that. I'm going to copy this section here. And just remove the menu part from that. There we go. Another thing I'm going to do is drop this down into here and have this one justify content a space evenly. There we go. Oh, and align self. In fact, I don't need align self on that. Let me put align items to flex end and move this down here. Oh wait, no. We leave this as align center. Small mistake there. What I actually want for this, and I have to split this in two, or no, let me just move this down to this one, and for this one, justify content flex end. Title, why are you being special? Oh, I see what happened. That should have been center, not align center. Alright, so all the random stuff is in place now. We can get to the fun stuff of glass. At least for the header and the nav. So for that, let's add some variables. Glass. Alright, let's call this top glass. We're going to use RGBA 255, 255, 255.5. And for okay, now my computer stuck a little bit. Hope it doesn't take too long doing whatever it's doing. Alright, should I drop it here? No, here, right. Background color. We're going to use that variable that we just created. It's not going to be visible yet, so just so that you can see that it is there, let me add a temporary background color because I'm going to get to the image probably last. Right. Oh, one small fix I need to make is moving left for title down to here, and for BG nav left will be %. Nope, sorry, 15. Don't know why I said 85. Another fix I need to make on all of y'all is box sizing. Right, there we go. Now everything's fixed together snugly and nicely. Let me move this actually to the nav only, and I'm going to change the title to use a different color. So for this one, I'm going to use and let's turn off the very ugly bullet points on these items in here. List style none, and text decoration. And oh wait, I need to put this in the actual anchor element. So B glass, menu, LIA. There we go. Believe it or not, as long as this is seeming to take, we are nearly done with this CSS section of everything. Oh, let me add a standard box shadow as well that can be shared between different items. So the glass top shadow is going to be 005px, or better yet, yeah, 8px or so should be good. RGB is 0.3. And the two of these can share that box shadow. Will not be immediately obvious because obviously the background is dark, so you can't actually see the shadow yet. Unless your screen is really good, you probably can't see it. I can see it, but barely. But that's on purpose. Just putting some necessary work in here for these anchor elements when they're hovered and active. And also for when they're visited. Good. Much better. Doing some cosmetic work here. Not absolutely necessary, but I like things to look good anyway, so that's why I'm doing all this now. I'll get back to that cosmetic work later. For now, let me focus on the task at hand before I get too distracted. Alright, so we got those in place and their glass and stuff sorted out. Oh yeah, one last thing here. Let me do text decoration. Not text decoration, text transform. Uppercase. And letter spacing. forgot to add a standard font size on the body as well. When I'm done, I'll probably pull in some Google fonts and really clean this up nicely so it looks really, spectacular and all that stuff. But for now, let me focus on the important things. Sorry for my tendency to tweak. That is just my personality. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, but I'm working on it. So the next thing we're going to cover now is the section BG glass upper. So let's drop that in here. Even in my CSS, I like to document my code. I can actually share some features with the stuff up here, so let me drop this around here. And if you're wondering why I just did all that there, avoiding code duplication. So wherever I can and I identify something that can be shared, as I said earlier, I go back and rearrange my code so that I can share as much as possible and reduce the amount of code that I have in general. So like down here, all I'll need now is flex flow to the row and wrap, because that'll be different for BG glass upper than the rest of the stuff. And the reason I'm using wrap on this is so that I do not have to have a secondary declaration for when it's on mobile devices. Alright, and let me check what I have here for, or if I do have justify content set. No, I don't. Okay. So justify content will be space evenly and we're going to use a different kind of glass on this one, so I'm going to duplicate this nav here, well this variable for the nav, and put upper, here, background color, var, BG, maybe glass, sorry. No, you're still not going to see that section yet because it does not have a width, a height, or anything like that. Oh, and I also need to position it, so let me add a margin to it. And you want to keep in mind, of course, the height of the title and the nav, despite the fact that they're fixed when the user is on a screen size where nothing is scrolled or scrollable. You still want to have adequate space. So let's go with a margin at the top of about 150 px and on the sides of about 35 px, or better yet, let's use view width for that. So we're gonna go with 15 VH and same 150. In fact, yeah, let's just leave it at 150 top and bottom. So 150 px and 15 VH. Or better yet, let's reduce that because that may be a little bit much. So 7.35 or so. There we go. Perfect. Then we can add padding to this. Let's say about 5 VH and 5 V width. I could use clamp for that, but I don't really want to go through all the mathematics for that right now. I'm going to leave border radius off. I was toying with that in my head, but I'll leave that off. And box shadow, let's add that as well. Let me see if I need to duplicate the box shadow I used up here or not. Yeah, I think I will actually. Reason being, I want to put this falling off in a different direction and change its spread and its opacity. If only this headset would stay in place. Alright, box shadow is that variable we just created, so B glass upper shadow, and you can already see that if your screen is good enough. Let me add a color to the body as well, save myself some trouble typing that over and over again. Alright, do I need to add anything else to this section? I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. So I'm not going to add a border to this. I'm going to jump straight to the articles. So B glass, article 0. Each of these will have a width of 25%. Background color, var, B glass, upper glass. Oh, forgot to add height. In fact, no, not height. Let me use align self stretch. This is a pretty cool property in Flexbox that will give any item you add the same height as the highest item within its container. So we're going to use that one. And oh yes, let's add padding which will be 3 VH and 3 view height. Well, view width and view height for that one. Wait a minute, I just realized something. One of these here has article 0 and it should be 1. Alright, so that's fixed. Clearly something is wrong here. Now these are overlapping the section they're in, so let me see what's going on. Obviously I forgot something. It's not necessarily something I forgot. It is the padding. You see, there's a number of ways I can fix this. I think. Let me see if minimum height should do it. Well, not minimum height. Let me put the height on it. Let's go at 10 VH. Or 50 VH. Right, that should do it. I'm going to reduce the width on these articles as well. As I warn you, I'm a tweaker, so I'm not tweaker as in terms of taking controlled substances. I just mean tweaker in terms of I like to play around with my values and stuff until I get it exactly as I want it. I think I could go in something a little later, so like 27. What happened there just now? One of them got wrapped, it would seem. Let me see if that's the case. Maybe not. Not sure what happened there just now. Anyway, I'm not trying to create something too spectacular today, just showing you the glass, and that's the important thing, so I will stop my perfectionism. Alright, let me add a shadow to these as well. What I actually will do with these, instead of just using a color, I will use a gradient. So background image instead of background color, but we're still going to use variables. Background image, linear gradient, and let's just shift this here inside of there and add another variable, which will be glass, nav glass. May not be immediately obvious, but there is a gradient there. Let me make it a little more obvious by duplicating this and moving it down here, changing it to upper glass 1 and increasing it, and then let me drop that in here. Right, there you go. Now you can definitely see that gradient for sure. anything else for those, so I will add the second section. I wish that you could use like calc on stuff like background images and stuff like that. That would be pretty cool. I'll have to investigate if that is actually possible and I'm just missing it, but I've never actually found anything that could do that. I do have a method for animating gradients, so I need to hurry up and write a tutorial on it. I promised that a while back and didn't remember to get to it, but I will be doing a tutorial on how to animate CSS gradients. It's technically a hack because it's not really animating them directly, so it's kind of like you're tricking people into thinking you're animating them, but yeah, it still should work, at least in theory. But I have to write that tutorial someday, so you can look forward to that as well. Anyway, for the background color, you have two options here. You can use a filter or you can write a new variable. In this case, I'm going to try the filter first. If that works, then I'll just use that. Then again, come to think of it, let me just go straight to the variable because the filter will take some work. You have to basically darken it and do a whole bunch of stuff. So let me not go with the filter because that's a lot of work and it's unnecessary. So I'll just type out the variable one time. But I could show you that someday. So for this darker glass, I'm going to take out the tools in this here. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Cecile. That's not what it is. I just had to throw that in there for fun. Alright, I'm going to just copy and paste one time and save myself some time and do the same strategy that I did just now. Replace... Oops. Let's try this again. Oh, it did work. Okay. Just do. Okay, good. Let's try that again. Oh, let's see what happened. I missed it. Good. So for lower flex flow will be column. We don't need anything to do with wrap there because, well then again, no, it should be row. I forgot. They're side by side. So let's leave it as column and wrap, or row and wrap, sorry. And width on these should be 43. of this being special. Am I missing? Oh yes, I am missing something. Forgot to add BG lure up here. The glass lure, I mean. So it wasn't even displaying as flex. There we go, fixed. Good. Now I get to use calc. I wanted to use this for fun just to show off, but yeah, so calc. Let me cut that and then paste. Calc 100% minus. How much padding do we have? 5, so let's make that 10. The height should do it. Right, there we go. Perfect. Lovely. And now for the final thing, adding the background image, and all of this will come together perfectly. So I'm going to take out this background color. By the way, you should see the glass now a little more clearly with a white background. Not bad at all. And for the background image, what picture should I use? Let's open GThumb and get some pictures to go with. Where is GThumb gone? Oh, there you are. This may take a minute because I'm running so much on my computer, but hopefully not too long. Alfred, where is the program? That was not my best Batman voice because I'm a little bit thirsty, but hey. Thank you, Alfred. Oh, but he was amazing, the princess. A little blurry though, so not that one. Oh, this looks cool. Yeah, I'm gonna use this as our background image. Y'all get all sorts of free skills just because I am a tweaker. You see what happened was I can't help myself when I start doing it. That's what happened. So what I just did, I added a dark layer on top of it and blurred it, and then I'm adding a duplicated layer of the original image, overlaying this, gives it a nice look like that. I'm going to turn down the opacity of this layer, and then we're going to blur again. Not quite as much as before though. Alright, so just adjusting the opacity on this middle layer here. And changing its blend mode to see what the effect will be. I think I like luminosity, so good, that looks nice there. Now I'm going to save this as, what do they call it again? B glass backdrop, right? Look at that. Now tell me that doesn't look good. I dare you. I know someone probably would, because they're just as bold as I am, but yeah. Alright, so the last thing we're going to do, just as a bonus, is I am going to show you how to turn this here into a menu. There's a little quirk that I often run into when I'm turning these into menus, and that can be a little bit annoying. So I'm going to try to avoid it again. I ran into it last night working on the tutorial because I didn't remember those little details. So actually, let me pull in one of my own tools, a library that I wrote called Toolbox. Saves me a lot of time. It's a very, very simple JavaScript library. Script source. Right. HTTPS /code/libraries/js/toolbox/toolbox. This is a lot to type, I know. /toolbox.js. Let me just make sure that I have the URL correct. Good, no errors. Alright, 1 second, let me get the music back up and running. Alright, back in business. Now, Toolbox is going to be used to toggle the menu on and off, so for that I'm going to need to add a button to our nav. This button will not have any content, and I will show you why in a minute. So over here, let's style the button first. B-glass, menu, button, border, none, background color. Let's just make it white one time, or better yet, no, let's make it kind of transparent. Or translucent, I should say. Should be margin right. Right, there we go. So now the button is in place as it should be. Now let us actually make it a hamburger menu. So I'm going to teach you a little trick that I use for my hamburger menus using a pseudo element. So B-glass, menu button, after, content will be three of these straight lines here. Oh, I forgot to put position on the button as well. So position, relative, and position on the after will be absolute. Top is, I'm going to probably need to adjust this as we go. Let's go for like, right, 25% should do it. And left will be 25% as well. Probably gonna need a little bit more than that. Alright, so there we have the hamburger menu, but it is twisted to the side, as you can see. You have two options. You can rotate this as is, or you can have it rotate on hover. So I'm actually going to have it rotate as is and then rotate on hover to this direction for when you're about to click it. So transform, rotate 90 degrees, and that will change where you position it slightly. So let's move the left is what we have to adjust, I think. Let's go in like 32%. Top, go 29.5. Yeah, that should do the trick. I think that's about good there. Well, let me go with 30 and a half for that too. Good. I could have used pixels, but I chose not to go with pixels this time. Alright, so now, before I move on, transition, all, about 0.5 seconds, and ease in out. Should do the trick. I'm going to duplicate this, take out the content, take out position, transform, rotate to 0. Now the reason I'm not putting in hover yet is so I can see what it looks like on the final result, and then we will add hover to it. Alright, so I need to adjust the positioning slightly. Because when it rotates, it changes position. Alright, so everything is good. Now watch this. So there you go, that is our button. Oh, one last thing. Let's add a change in background color to the menu button. Filter, let's go with sepia 100. In fact, let me do what I did before so I can see what the result will be. Of course, this is all random at this point. I'm not really trying to figure out anything too special. Just trying to get something that doesn't look completely terrible. But I'm showing you some tricks of the trade that I use when I'm doing stuff like this. Alright, so that's in place. And I'm going to put hover back on that and add transition to this. I could have used variables for this, but too lazy to scroll up right now, so that should do the trick. Good, there we go. Looking really nice. Not gonna add any more states like when you click it and all that stuff. We're just gonna get to the fun stuff. So to turn this here into a menu, you have two options. You can use a media query or you can use a class. In this case, I'm going to use a class. So for that, I'm going to put bglass menu mobile. Normally I would use a media query for this, but for the sake of doing this quickly, I'm just going to use a class instead. So bglass menu mobile will set. Alright, let me use toolbox for this before I get any further. Toggle class. Menu and bglass menu mobile. And I just need to add an ID to this now. Oops. ID menu. Toggle class is a function in toolbox that will add or remove a class whenever you run it. So we're going to be toggling the class bglass menu mobile whenever you click on this button. Alright. Bglass menu mobile will turn this this menu here into a mobile menu. So for that mobile menu, I'll have display to block, and I don't think I need to do anything else. Let me just double check that quickly. Oh right, position, forgot, yeah, position fixed, top 50 pixels. Is it applying that class? As I told you, I usually run into some sort of quirk when I'm doing this, and I just need to double check I'm not missing anything. Alright, inspect alignment. It is not adding it, so I'm clearly missing something. Alright, I'm gonna... you know what I did? I put class instead of on click. I should have noticed. I knew something wasn't right, but I also knew that I did everything else right. So my code is right. Why isn't my code working? It was that. There we go. That's what it was. I knew it had to be that. Alright, so instead of using display flex, we use display block. And the reason for that is using display flex, I find there's a quirk in it that causes these items not to be in their full width when you want them to be. So you have to use display block to get them to work correctly. At least that is so far my experience. Still trying to find a fix for that because I prefer using flexbox and the flexibility, no pun intended, that it gives you, but for whatever reason it doesn't work with the semantic element for menus that you're supposed to use at this point in time. Which is why I would love us to actually get the menu element that is appropriate for this purpose. You'd think that we'd innovate to that point by now. Anyway, enough ranting. Let me finish this. So background color, bglass, lower glass is what I'm going to use for this. I'm going to add a border to it. Turn off the margin. Left will be 0 and border sizing. No, not border, said box sizing. No, no, I said border sizing. Right. Alright, so all that is in place now. DG glass glass, sorry, menu LI width of 100%. Display of flex, justify content center, align items center, padding 15 px of 0. I forgot also to add bottom to this. Calc 100% minus 50 px. Let me take a bottom, because bottom is not going to be necessary anymore. We're also going to want a background color on these. Good. Alright, so that's basically it for our menu. Oh, one last thing. I forgot these anchor elements also need some special stuff done to them. In fact, let me leave all that stuff in place for them to accept the background. And padding, because I don't, well, yeah, let me leave padding in place too. And turn it off on this actually. This is not my preferred way to build menus, by the way. I prefer to use non-semantic elements like this because, quite frankly, all this complication is a little bit unnecessary if you ask me. The only reason why I'm doing this is because semantic elements are better for SEO and accessibility, but truth be told, this is a lot of unnecessary stuff for a simple menu. If you use the methods I normally use, you don't do all this. I would rather use the area attributes and stuff like that to get it correct, but it is what it is. This is the world we live in. You have to adjust to certain things, but not my preference personally. Alright, so that should do it for our menu. Let me add a transition, by the way, to make this look a little more fancy. I now remember this is probably in the wrong spot. Is it? Whatever. Not important, just me being a perfectionist. So I hope you enjoyed today's stream and I hope you were able to learn some cool techniques. I'll probably make all these files available through GitHub or some other location, and hopefully I should be able to complete my streaming page soon so that you'll be able to get downloads and everything from there. I am Roland Taylor, aka Roland Dix, or you can find me on Twitter. I'll drop that in the chat right now. You can find me on Facebook, but I hardly use it. I'm only on there for necessity right now. But if you need to find me on there, I'm on there as well. And I'm on YouTube, same handle. Also gonna drop that in the chat. Obviously, if you're watching me, you know that I'm on Twitch. And basically anywhere else that there is social media, you can probably find me under the same handle. So until next time, hope you enjoyed it, hope you had fun, hope you learned something. And if you have any questions, you can find me on my Twitter, you can find me on my YouTube channel, etc. And you can ask me directly. If you would like training, you can contact me at rolandixer@gmail.com, or you can contact me via Telegram by the same handle as well. And yeah, so that's basically it. If you want to contact me anywhere, or you can visit my website and find my contact information there if you would like one-on-one training or any other assistance like that, or if you're looking for a designer to build your website or your graphics or anything. And I'm also open to being hired if you want to hire me. If you like me and you want to hire me and you want to reach out, feel free to do that. So yeah, I'll see y'all probably within a few days, because I'm planning to stream more often. So look for me anytime that I decide to pop up, but definitely on Thursdays, 5:30. You can find me streaming every Thursday. Alright, so that's it for now. Catch you all later.